Hello out there, and how is it going? It's kind of a big night for us. First time we've actually done this live stream thing in a long time. I've done it before in the past for gaming, but new location and time for something new. So this is the first LSX Hunter live stream. Thanks for joining us, guys. So I want to begin this by really getting into kind of who we are and what we do. So basically, our entire goal is to build cars by hand. We see a lot of guys purchasing things, just going excessive and really showing that it is a rich man's game. It's not necessarily the case if you're willing to scrounge and use old parts, and just kind of express yourself in your own unique way. And that goes into goal setting. So the first thing with setting goals is really setting yourself up for success with manageable goals. The big thing with that is setting up, things that you actually can do using created itemized lists. These itemized lists are things that you can actually make actionable plans on to actually execute without struggling, failing anyway. And that comes with understanding your limits. Actually understanding your limits is a big deal. You really have a grasp on what you can and can't achieve, but really, if you can't achieve it, you just don't know it yet. So a lot of what we do in the garage is pretty intense things. I've spent a lot of time recently just straight cleaning things, just straight up stripping things. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort for what you actually get. That said, when it's done, it's done. I'm not coming back to it. I'm not dealing with it again. And when I have to take the car back apart, I can do it without an issue. And that sets my goals later down the road to be a heck of a lot easier. So that's something to really consider if you're working on things like that in a very intricate way. But the first thing when you're learning to set goals is you really want to look at your knowledge. This is basically how well you know the subject or how well you've done your research. The big deal with that really is going into things prepared. If you're not prepared, you don't know how to set your goals accurately. And that brings us to the next thing, which is measurable goals and measurable pieces here and there. Goals are meant to be broken. Goals are meant to be met, right? That's the entire reason why we have goals, is to actually get through our projects and have measurable ideas of what's going on. So is there a certain start and an end to this goal? Like the A-arms, for instance. A-arms are finished when it has new bushings, new paint. I mean, that's just kind of how it is. But if you're like, well, my goal is to have a car that rides well. Okay, well, what does rides well? Is that cutting quicker slaloms? Is that soft, smooth ride? Understanding these actual goals and metrics will help you actually achieve what you want and narrow your focus on your buying your parts, which is a big deal. And that talks to our physical assets. That's our tools, that's our parts on hand, our physical space, like garages. So you don't really know what you need to buy until you get moving on the project and start making those goals. Once these goals are made, like for instance, we need to do an engine swap. Okay, well, why do we need to do an engine swap? What is actually wrong with the engine and why isn't it working? If it's just like a cam thing or something like that, then okay, so we need a cam, some gaskets, like the Valley Pan gaskets, things like that go with that specific project. And I've fallen into this a lot, especially lately with the COVID stuff with the shipping, is I'll order a part and then I don't have that part for months, or I'll start the project and then I can't get that part for months, and that puts me behind. Versus actually putting ahead the forethought to order those parts and have them ahead of time to make your goals easier to achieve and faster to achieve. Really, it's all about setting yourself up for success from the very beginning, and that's what really it's all about. And that talks to the tools. Do you have the actual tools needed to complete the project? If you have a basic set of hand tools, you're not going to sandblast, an arm or suspension piece. It's just not going to happen. That said, can you get those tools? Do you have access to those tools? Can you figure out a way to make the goal possible? And if you have certain tools, plan the time accordingly. And that goes into, the effort part of it is, what is your time actually worth? What is your available time? Do you have time to actually complete this project? If you know tearing the entire suspension apart is going to take you, call it 20 shop hours, I mean more than that, more than likely. Do you actually have that kind of available time? And what does a shop hour look like to you? If you're like me, you'll spend a lot of time where you'll stare at a project and you'll just visualize how to do it. You'll think things through in a way that most people don't think things through, and that costs time. Yeah, it's time up front, but does it cost time down the road? I'm a firm believer of thinking things through critically, 5 steps ahead typically. So what that allows me to do is, if I'm working on just doing a cam or whatever, well, do I also need to upgrade the valve springs? More than likely, yeah. I mean, there's pieces that go with that to where if you're buying just the cam, okay, now you've bought the cam, you've put the cam in place. Okay, but now these valve springs need to be replaced. Okay, but should I do my valve seals while I'm there? More than likely they're cheap. You might as well do it while you're there with the added spring pressure, all that stuff. Things can change on a dime depending on what you're doing. So it's important to really plan these things out and to think 5 steps ahead. And that goes to the thing where guys like Driveway Engineer. The dude does things extremely cheaply, but he plans his project so far ahead, whether he thinks he does or not. I don't care what he says. JR knows what he's talking about, and he's a perfect example of planning things ahead and doing things the way that is the cheapest, right way possible. You like I said before, you can throw parts at it. That's fine. If you have money to do that, absolutely, that's cool. But there are those of us that want to achieve with a lower dollar put into it, and that's what it's really all about for us. But again, that goes to thinking ahead and being able to say, okay, well, if I do this cheaply here, I can do spend more money here, and just kind of plan things the right way to get a cohesive build for what you're after. But again, cost versus time. Is it actually cheaper for you to put your car into a shop, to pay somebody else to do it? It's a very kind of disheartening thing when you're talking about built, not bought, yet saying, sometimes it's just not worth my time to install that piece. For instance, on 3rd Gen F bodies, I've had several throughout the years, but there's one thing that I will not do on my F bodies. Well, 2 things. Spark plugs and headers. I absolutely refuse to put headers on the 3rd Gen myself, especially when I've had multiple shops do them for $200. It's not worth my pain in the butt to do that when it costs me $200 to have somebody else do it, and it just show up back at my door perfectly done. I mean, you need to think critically about, is it worth your time? A lot of guys use the example of oil changes. A lot of guys that work on their own cars don't do their own oil changes. It's just not worth their time. It costs the same to do the oil change yourself. Call it $40. Would you rather put that $40 in time, $40 and time towards it, or just the $40? So you got to think these things through with what you actually need. Now I see a few more guys pulling in, coming on here. So thanks for coming in, guys. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us during our first live stream. Feel free to comment. Feel free to point out things. If you guys have any comments, let me know. I'm curious about what you guys are thinking right now. But capability. Capability is a big deal. You need to understand what you actually know and what you can do. Having the capability to recognize your own faults and your own successes is a big deal. If you know that you are actually good with suspension work, but you can't stand engine work, trading that kind of work with friends and just guys you hang out with is a good idea. There are plenty of guys in local clubs that are willing to teach you if you're willing to help them out on their projects, and that's just awesome. I mean, that's what the community thing is supposed to be all about, right? Is working together to achieve things. But really, my main things when I'm setting my goals is I will look at what are the known metrics. Have I done this before? And if I have, what tools do I need? Where's my measurable start and end? Do I have the parts on hand? Do I have everything I need to actually achieve what I'm trying to achieve? And then that goes down to what is the average time per part or average time per success? Especially if I'm trying to charge for something, knowing what that's going to cost is important to the end customer and the end user. And this harkens back to my IT thing, or my IT world experience, is you really need to know what the average time is so you can bill somebody. If I'm doing control arms on like the Firebird, and the first time it took me 8 hours per side. Well, now I know the second time what happens, to get that A-arm installed. So then it took me 4 hours. Okay, well the next time, say the Le Mans, it's the same style. It took me 2 hours. Finally, it took me half an hour on the final side. Now, mind you, that's nothing going wrong. That is just simply learning curve. The learning curve is there because I was too ignorant to use the resources available to me. You don't have to learn from your own past experiences either. There are plenty of guys out here, myself, Monty, Full Monty's Garage. There's a bunch of guys Fast Monty's Garage. There are a bunch of guys that are willing to teach you these things with their own experiences, and you don't have to learn from their failures, and that's absolutely key. But again, take averages as you're working on this stuff, and there are unknown metrics as well that you really need to consider when you're looking at setting goals. So things like bolts breaking, things just not going right. There are a few guys that I've been talking to recently that have been fighting broken bolts, that have been fighting just odd pieces and odds and ends, and it adds time to the overall job. A lot of times what I'll do when I first quote somebody something, I will add twice as much time as I think it's going to take. The floor in the GTO, we thought that was going to take, 2-3 months, something like that, and it actually took us around a month. And mind you, I'm not at this full time in the garage. Most of my time is actually spent on the social media side. A lot of my dad's side is spent working on the cars themselves. He's more of metal work. As if it comes to like suspension, engine type, stuff like that, that's where I get involved. A lot of the work lately has been body, so he has been just knocking that stuff out while I'm doing this stuff. So it's hard for me to quote those types of jobs. So again, I add double because I don't know. But a lot of times I'll bring my price down if that's the case, or bring my mental price down if that's the case, just so that I can know my time might be worth $50 an hour doing with this job, but my time's only worth $5 an hour if I'm doing this job, because I just don't know enough to be successful at it or efficient at it. But there's other problems. If you work in a small garage, lost tools constantly. Lost tools is a major issue. That is something that I struggle with because I cannot put tools away in the same spot ever. But it is what it is, and I deal with it every day. So it's fine. It's fine. But really, all of this boils down to just the execution of itself, and not making excuses and just following through. Being able to actually follow through on what you're trying to do is the entire goal and the entire idea. If you're not willing to actually follow through and complete the job, then why set goals in the first place? We all have excuses. I'm in Michigan. It's been hailing. It's cold. I used an excuse today. I didn't feel like going outside and dealing with the rear end of the Le Mans because it was cold and rainy. That means that I can't make my goal because I'm not outside doing the work. Hey, Jake, how's it going? Good to see you finally made it. And we learn as much if we fail as if we succeed. And that's a huge thing, is willing to admit that you failed. There are a lot of times that I have just absolutely struggled with a project and be like, dude, I can't do this. I don't know what's going on. Get somebody over here that knows what they're doing. Sometimes it's something as simple as the dude walks in, hits it with a hammer once, walks away, and now it's fixed. If you guys haven't checked out Heavy Pedal Garage and you guys are really into like fiberglass work, he's been doing a lot of body work lately on his Firebird. Check out Heavy Pedal Garage. His stuff is freaking awesome. He has a lot better work than we do. I mean, I don't know, man. I love your car. But anything Firebird formula, I'm a big fan of. So, but really, what did you learn when you failed? What did you learn when you succeeded? What are you taking away from these experiences? That's what it's really all about in the end, is taking away from these experiences things that you can use on further projects. My entire goal with what I want to see you guys do is I want to see the projects keep moving. I get emails all the time from you guys, and I really like seeing that stuff. It's great to see you guys actually making progress on your builds as we're doing our stuff. It's just really cool. We really appreciate the interaction. Really, guys, that's all I've got on setting goals. So at this point, I mean, we might as well just kind of hang out. I've got a little bit of a drink, so might as well just do our thing for the night, right? Talk some cars. But if you guys enjoyed my rant, I appreciate it. Always awesome talking to you guys. Hey, Bill. Now, you've been commenting quite a bit on all this stuff and been hanging out. I know we've got a few things going on with, a 400 build, a 428 build, another guy doing a 455, a 461. I know Heavy Pedal mentioned in comments about a 350 Pontiac that he's working on or wanting to work on. And that thing, I don't know what it is about that, but the 350 Pontiac really piques my interest. It's just such a unique, weird thing. I love it. I love the car. I love the engine. But like I mentioned in that comment, there's a 600 CFM dirt carb, the Holley XP setup. I was looking at running that for the 326. It seems like it'd be more than enough CFM. I mean, I run 600 CFM carbs on 400s for fuel economy and throttle response, and it seems totally fine. So I wonder what it would do with 326 with a lot of cubes, or CFM, through the carb. Actually, we've got a bunch of small block Chevy stuff coming up too. The Camaro gets its transmission and engine pulled in the next little while. That's going to be a big key for us is getting that car back on the road. I haven't driven in like 2, 3, 4 weeks other than my truck, and it has absolutely killed me. At work, it's 9 o'clock. That's terrible. Yeah, I think I ended up, the night I killed the Camaro, I drove like, what was it, 50 miles in second gear on the 700R4. Went out to hang out with my girlfriend. We did a couple things at a park. Come back, and third gear just let go. So I ended up with an extra neutral. I may have been launching the car, and it may have been on a full hit that it went out. It's possible that's what happened, but I would never admit that to anybody. But if you're into the old TPI stuff, we got a bunch of that stuff coming up here soon too. What was that, like the 1450 or 1405, 1406, something like that? I think that's what I've got on mine, my 350. It seems like a totally adequate carburetor, if that's what it is. I mean, I've had no issues with it other than the initial setup, but the car sat for like 10 years, something crazy like that. The car was running when I got it, but it also was a big block Chevy when I got it. But hand-me-down cars, and people don't really know what they got, so 'tis what it is. So I've been seeing a lot of guys mention on the groups after I talked about the intake stuff yesterday. A bunch of guys running 850 carbs on smaller engines. I don't know if anybody else has experience with this, but everything I've ever dealt with a large carb like an 850 on a 350 Chevy or 383, anything under 550 horsepower, it has just a ton of issues. A ton of issues. The stammering off the line that I've noticed is way higher with an 850, and that's why like I go for the 650, 600 CFM carburetors. I know I'm giving up top end, but also I'd rather have that vacuum and the just the ability to have throttle response. I mean, I do a lot of cornering in my cars. I don't know if you do cornering in your cars, Jake, but like that's a big deal to me, being able to actually corner a car and not worry about bogging. So I know a bunch of these states are shut down, but has anybody had a chance to get to a car show yet this year? I mean, I've been seeing a few pictures here and there, and I think is it Indiana had a pretty good car show for the Pontiacs 2 weeks ago. No, Chad Logan was there, and I think he was there anyway. Saw a bunch of pictures from him, Pontiac Underground. It's nice to see some guys actually getting out and enjoying their cars now. You know, I haven't really played with the Rochesters all too much. Honestly, I typically run for a Holly, if at all possible. It's just kind of a spoiled kid thing. I know a lot of guys run the Rochesters and have good successes with them, but it's just not something I've ever really dealt with. I think you can port them out and get a little more out of them. I've got one on the bench from the 326 that I want to play with. I've heard of guys porting them. I've heard of guys getting more CFM out of them, but it doesn't seem like you'd gain that much. I think they're only like a 500 CFM carburetor from begin with. Now I gotta look it up, because it can't be that much. Oh, and they are dirt cheap too. Yeah, they're like a Rochester 37001. It's a 500 CFM carb. Man, I don't think that's enough to really support that much horsepower. Yeah, so you're gonna see some Q-Jet stuff coming up here. I've got some plans for Q-Jet. I want to convert one for E85 and use it on a stock factory intake with a stock set of heads and a stock cam, just running something crazy like 10-to-1 or 11-to-1 with E85 and an all-stock trim Pontiac. I think that'd be really, really unique and really cool, and probably really cheap to run. HEI distributors are hard to say. Hanson Racing did a video on the new Bluetooth setup. I'm really curious about that myself. I run all Accel stuff. We've got the Summit billet one in the 400 for the Le Mans. The reviews on that one are really, really all over the place. I hear they're either fantastic or terrible. If I was going to recommend one, I think it's an Accel Pontiac. Look at the one I bought for the Firebird, because I actually really like that one. I dropped it in and it just kind of worked, so I can't really complain about it at all. The problem is it is god-awful ugly. Oh, you know what? I did end up with a Pertronix Flamethrower HEI, is what I have in the Firebird, with a Accel Supercoil on the top. Is what I ended up with. I wish I would have gone with the Flamethrower coil and module instead. The Accel coil is a giant pain to get on and off, and I've broken it twice. The Super coil is just a giant pain, and it's kind of ugly. I would go anything else other than that. Go the Flamethrower HEI if you can afford it. I think it's like $250. It's a little expensive, but it's really worth it. Oh, really? I would be really curious to see how that runs. 800 CFM really seems like the right combination. Yeah, Cliff is a great builder, so I'd be curious to see how that turns out. I've been seeing a lot of guys doing the carburetor modifications. It's just not something that I'm overly familiar with. Again, I come from the TPI world for the most part, and even if I run that, I run a Holly carb if I don't run TPI. So, it's just kind of hard to say. But yeah, Cliff is the man, I guess, for most carburetor work. I've been seeing, oh gosh, what was it? Somebody else working on a Q-Jet. Oh, it was Cliff. It was Cliff. Yeah, so yeah, he's the man. If you get work done from him, it's totally worth it. I know he's like $7 to ship, and he does a lot of Pontiac stuff. I think he does a lot of. God, what was the other one? It was Turbo 400s that he works on too. Yeah, you see, the problem with the old man is he knows too much. And the problem is now he's on a moderator account. Yeah, it's nice having somebody around that actually knows a thing or two about these old carburetors. Because, I mean, once we start dealing with EFI, that's a lot more my realm. And, man, I am just so much more comfortable with being able to work on a timing table rather than, like, weights and springs and things like that. So I'm really looking towards doing that Bluetooth ignition setup on the Firebird long term. Yeah, if you can get somebody that will actually, like, do your curve for you and have you pedal, have you mapped your timing curve yet on an actual spreadsheet? Because I'm curious of what it actually does in the car versus what the weights and springs say they should do. So something to consider with 1.65 rockers on Pontiac heads is a lot of times you need to actually notch the pushrod hole. Otherwise, you can get binding. It's not a big deal. A lot of machine shops will do it. You can do it by hand. I think roller rockers, I mean, what are you trying to do? You want full rollers or do you want just roller tip? I mean, that's kind of a big question too, is how far you want to go. I think it was Engine Masters did a test where they didn't find much difference between the trunnion rollers and the tips. But it seems like if you're willing to run that, you're going to end up with a longer lasting engine. And you can kind of really get the lash right to run higher RPM if that's what you're after. But I mean, really, under $300 a set really isn't that bad. $280 should get you Scorpions. And that's full roller, trunnion, and tip, I do believe. And they're aluminum. It's just one of those things that you want to spend good money on it. Like lifters. Uncle Tony's Garage, was talking to him, or looking at his stuff a few days ago, and noticed that he was talking about cheap lifters. Comp Cams is bad for it. There's a bunch of other Chinese import brands, white box brands, lifters that fail on a regular basis with flat tappets. So keep an eye out for that. That can be a major problem if you let it be. That's kind of the real advantage, though, of rollers. If you're willing to go that way with roller lifters. Yeah, I'm sure he's got it right. I mean, really, the dude knows what he's doing. It's just a matter of I like knowing that stuff just so that I know how my timing is set for fueling. It just seems like the more I learn about the timing setting and stuff like that, the more I can get my fueling correct. But that also comes into play too with like wide band O2s, things like that. But learning from guys like Scott Hansen from TPI stuff and Brian, TPI chip guy, learning from those guys has been a big deal with how I approach timing and things like that. on these engines, especially with iron heads. There's a pretty good chance you're going to see some timing stuff if I can get the stupid Firebird rolling. The Firebird is meant to be our test mule. That car is meant to be torn apart 100 different times. That's why it's just getting the basic black insides, basic, roughed up body. I really don't care with that car. The whole point of that thing is so I can show you guys setting timing, setting lash, setting just a bunch of intake temperatures, a bunch of different things that I want to do with that engine in that car. So once that car is rolling, it'll be good to go for these tests. Somebody, not saying who, may have drove the car out of the garage and crushed the oil pan on the Firebird. That's why we haven't seen that in a little while. It depends on the timing curve. I will typically go for manifold vacuum. That is just kind of what I prefer. It's just what most things call for, so that's usually what I go with. It's just a more standard in timing. I know a lot of late 70s things switched to... Oh gosh, now I gotta look it up, see whether it was switched to ported or not. During the late 70s, they switched to better improve the fuel economy of these cars. But that said, they did EGR as well, so they pulled more vacuum. So it's hard to say whether it actually improved it or not. Typically, though, I'll throw it on manifold vacuum and just call it good there. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so manifold vacuum basically is for cars that don't have PCV. Most of my cars get PCV removed almost immediately. I run a catch can on most of my, or all of my cars, because I don't like that stuff running back through my engine and gumming up my intake. Ported vacuum, a lot of times is for emission-controlled vehicles. So anything with PCV you want to make sure you have extra vacuum for, you want to have PCV and da-da-da-da EGR. Not a fan. I don't like it. Manifold vacuum is my go-to. And I think the Edelbrock, it calls for manifold vacuum on non-EGR cars, when I looked at the manual anyway. That said, everybody has their own preference with how they set their timing. So, it's just really hard to say with that. Something to consider, too, is your cam with what you're going for manifold or ported timing. A lot of times, a modified engine will have less inches of vacuum, so that's something to really consider. So the 6S4 heads are a 90cc, 92cc-ish head from the late 70s. They're just a smaller cc head of the 6S8s. They're usually a 211 177 or 211 166 valve. They're large valve. They're low compression heads. A lot of guys will mill them down to 85 cc. Once that's done, you get your 10-ish, 9-ish to 1 compression ratio, depending on whether you're using flat tops, dished pistons, whatever, what have you. It's just a more manageable head for 400s and 455s. And they're cheap. They are dirt cheap. For D-port heads, they flow as well as like a 16 or something like that, with just a hair of work. They don't need much work at all. I think they're 211 CFM, 200 to 211 CFM factory. So they're not terrible. Your 16 heads were like 220, 225 CFM. So they're not that much worse than the performance heads, except for the 72cc heads on the 16s and the 92cc on the 6X4s. Personally, I'd go 6X4s on a 400. I'd go 16s on a 350. I would go 6X 6X4s on a 455 also, more than likely. They're just a good head. And if you look at, I think, Butler, Fulper, Blue Monkey, a bunch of those guys, they all do 6X4 heads just because they're the cheapest things to get a hold of. They're like $175, I think, on eBay typically. And you can make them worth $500 or $600 if you port them out. So a lot of guys will do that just because the simple flipping of the heads. Yeah, people that like ported vacuum, there's a religion to it. There's definitely a group of people that believe ported vacuum is the only way to go. You know, and they might be right for their specific engine. Everything is so different depending on what engine it is, how your cam's set up, how your heads are set up, how sketchy your intake is. If you have leaks, if you have that Brodix turtle that has a massive leak in the bottom, like my Torquer 2 probably will have. There's just a lot of issues that you can run into with vacuum systems. So anything I can do to have the most manageable and consistent vacuum is what I'll go for. But actually, kind of mentioning about heads a little earlier, I've been really looking at closed chamber heads for Pontiac. Coming from the small block and big block Chevy world, the closed chamber heads are like the holy grail heads. And yet in Pontiac world, they act like they're the redheaded stepchild. I mean, they act like they're the worst heads imaginable, and I don't understand it. Because the flow numbers are there, the horsepower is there. Mind you, in 67, when they had closed chamber heads, these numbers were taken with gross horsepower, not net horsepower, a lot of times. So that means that these numbers are taken with open exhaust and no pulleys and, you know, just a completely free engine. So the 250 horsepower you're getting out of the 326 might actually be like 180, 190-ish, more than likely, by the time you're all said and done. And that's kind of indicative of the times. That's why I like see a lot of these cars that are running like the Ram Air 3, 325 horsepower. Yet the thing still runs 14s. More than likely, it's either gearing, which we can have that discussion too if you guys want to talk gears. But it's a function of just the numbers don't mean what they mean. And engines used to be built by a guy or a group of guys in a shop doing their thing. They weren't just punched out by computers like they are now. That's why like the LS is what the LS is. It's not necessarily that it works better. It's that the head flow is so significantly better than our Pontiacs, our Mopars, our small block Chevys, that it's able to get that much more efficiency out of it. I mean, you got to think that a lot of these LS heads are flowing 250 CFM factory. So, I mean, we're paying big bucks to flow that kind of a rate. I mean, we're paying $1,800 a set for Speedmasters or $2,800 a set, $2,400 a set for Edelbrocks to flow that kind of airflow. And their stock cams are garbage. I mean, really, they're about the same stock cam as a 78 Firebird 400, W72 package. Yeah, the 96 head are just hard to come by. There's nothing wrong with them. I mean, that's like the 16 heads. People love the 16 heads. They're the same as a few other Pontiac heads. But guys love the 4X heads for some reason when the 4X heads are the most inconsistent heads possible on Pontiac. The 96 heads were off a 71 400, I think, right? Now I gotta look. Yeah, and they should flow the same as a 16 head. They should flow the same as a lot of other things. They're just hard to come by. Like, I'm going to look them up on eBay and see what they go for. Because that's really the factor for most people is, are the heads worth the price, or can I get 6X heads cheaper? As far as street gears go for a 65 GTO 4-speed, I'm a big fan of, like, 342 gears. I'm a big fan of 373 gears. It depends on the final gear of that 4-speed. And are you actually driving the car? Are you just racing the car? For a good street gear, I'd go 352 or 342s and just kind of run it that way. The difference between 342s and like a 373 is really minimal, except for the fuel economy. You're going to gain a little more fuel economy on 342s, not much, 1 or 2 miles a gallon. But if you're running a carburetor in these big cars, 1 or 2 miles a gallon adds up over time. Especially because you want to drive these cars as much as you possibly can. Yeah, here's a set of... Let's do this. So here's the set of 96 heads for $1,700. $90 shipping. I think that's probably why guys aren't talking about them. Because, we'll just go right here. We'll go 6X. Pontiac Heads. Okay, I could buy an engine for less than that price with the heads on it. Mind you, those heads are garbage. But, it's all expensive, I guess. But something I want to draw attention to you guys, too, is don't buy heads on eBay. Please do not buy heads on eBay, unless they're my heads. And then you can buy my heads. You're much better served looking on Facebook groups. And if you guys are curious about what groups to buy from, I can certainly do that and get you guys some information on who you want to buy from. We've got a bunch of heads and parts and intakes and stuff like that coming along through the shop. So if you guys are wanting to buy parts for Pontiac stuff, let me know what you're looking for. And there's a really strong chance we're going to be able to get some parts sourced for you. I'm more than happy to take things to the blaster and clean things out and kind of refurbish things for you if you want things done. Now you got me curious. I'm looking at all these. The pricing on these heads has jumped up quite a bit. Yeah, so Billy mentioned a 4-speed. What 4-speed are you thinking of? And I think we're going to throw a 3-speed back into the 65 GTO we have in the shop now. I think that thing... I think we're going to put I think it's their TH350s we're going to throw back into it. The car originally came with a 4-speed stick. It's just hard to come by. I just don't feel like spending the money, or if we don't feel like spending the money on that to end up putting more effort into it and cost into it before we sell the car. The guy that owns the car has the car for sale, so if you're interested in that 65 GTO we've been working on, that thing needs to get out of my shop because I want to work on the next project he has, which is a 64 Tempest, which is kind of one of my dream cars. I love the 64s, and I really want to see that thing in the shop. So... interesting. So that Muncie has some really interesting gear ratios. That could be really, really fun with the 373. if you're not trying to drive the car very often. Yeah, those 96 heads are just expensive. It's like the 16 heads. If you can find a set of 16 heads for cheap, grab them, sell them, go buy some metal Brocks. I mean, the price on factory stuff just blows my mind sometimes, especially when you can source the stuff locally for a heck of a lot cheaper if you look around or are willing to scrounge. So, yeah, the final gear on that is 1. So there's no overdrive in that Muncie. So, yeah, I would go, if you're going to do any racing at all 8th mile, 373s. If you're going to drive the car on the street, 342s. That's what I would do if it was my car. Yeah, there are a few Pontiac heads that are really looked over. I think, gosh, there was one in the late 60s. I think they are. Uh, 64 heads? Yeah, 64 heads is another one that people don't really talk about. So the thing with 96 heads is I think they are a 96cc chamber, which is like perfect for a 455. The 64 heads are an 87cc with D-port. So it's basically what you're doing to mill down your 6X4s already done. So that's something to factor in too, is if you're going to spend the money on milling down your 6X4s, would you be better served putting that same money towards a better head? They all flow about the same. But would you rather put that same money into a new set of heads? Or would you rather be certain that the head is actually square and right and milled and perfect? I mean, these old parts, the chances of a Pontiac that having been overheated, let's be honest. You guys drive Pontiacs. They overheat. That's just what they do, especially in the middle of summer. With all that being said, I'm really curious about the 196, 166 valve sizes on a 350 size engine. To me, it seems like, Chevy, Pontiac, Ford, a lot of those guys, everybody has made a performance engine with small valves. I understand that you can only move so much air with certain size valves, but by increasing the valve size, you're also increasing the surface area that air can move. So my thought process is, I think by going with like a smaller valve setup, basically like a 15 head example. If I used a 15 head to use as a performance head on the Pontiac 350 or 326, I think that actually would do more benefit than anything else. I think it would increase the torque and increase the horsepower. It would just move the entire thing up in general because of the compression ratio difference. The port volume velocity would be significantly increased by decreasing the size of the port or the valves. I think that's a really good idea, but I've got heads sitting in the shop. We'll probably try it. So I've got Draggy, I've got the ability to do tests back to back with 1/8 mile and quarter mile. I'm probably gonna end up doing that sometime down the road. So I've got 15 heads, I've got 16 heads, I've got 6x4s, and we've got 6x8s. Yeah, that's where I am too. Is like, for the price of 96 heads, you might as well go aluminum at that point. Yeah, I mean, as long as you clear up the exhaust, because the Pontiac really struggles on the exhaust. If you look at a lot of the flow numbers, I'll show you some flow charts so you guys can get a grasp of what people are doing. So if you look at so if you look at flow charts, we're going to notice that Pontiac really, really struggles on the exhaust. Mind you, this is with the 166. So going to 177 valves will definitely increase that. But is it really worth it? I mean, and then if we look at, just a basic head from like, what is it? The Chevy heads. 83s? The flow for an 83 garbage head like I have on the Camaro is about the same. So the exhaust really is where Pontiac struggles with a much bigger valve. So consider that as well. I would say spend some time clearing out that exhaust. I think you already did that from the sounds of it. Check your headers. A lot of headers will have like welding balls of garbage inside the headers. So it's really important that you look inside your header tubes and make sure that that's actually cleaned out so you're not introducing interference and changing your resonance in the intake, in head, and all that jazz. So just make sure you keep an eye out for that, because that can be a big deal if you let it be. But really, hopefully we can avoid that and just do what you did and make extra power. Did he mention why he wanted 96 heads over 6x4s? Just, kind of curious about it. Okay. Yeah, those are usually pretty clean. I think I actually have a set in the GTO. Yeah, those are usually pretty clean. Most of those are sand cast, so they come out fairly nice. But again, it wouldn't hurt just to look at them. They're probably totally fine. I'm sure you already did that. Now I look at flow numbers at 96, because I think, Hot Rod Magazine ended up at about the same flow numbers. So Hot Rod Magazine, Pontiac 96. The intake or the exhaust is definitely better. If you see, the exhaust valve size is larger. So that would be where your gains are. See, the intake actually is a little bit less. That's a function of just that particular head, I would imagine. So yeah, they are a little better head. And you could throw 177 valves in the 6x4s for not that much more. And if you're going to do that, you might as well do a 3-angle valve job. There's no point in not doing it at that point. Ooh, yeah, Pontiac G-body. Yeah, good luck. You basically need any kind of tight-fitting chassis thing you could possibly get, because that's the only thing you're going to find that's going to work. I love the idea of the Pontiac G-body. I have absolutely loved to have a 78 Grand Prix or something like that. Cannot find parts. Could not find parts that would actually make me happy with it. Yeah, see, and I have a distinct complaint with headers on the 78 Firebird that I have. I have to take my exhaust off before I can change my oil filter. You know how annoying that is? Yeah, it's just, oh, not a fan. Not a fan of the Pontiac oil filter location. Oil filter relocation kit is gonna happen on probably the Le Mans, probably the Firebird, more than likely whatever else we work on, because this just sucks. It just sucks. How does the convertible compare versus the hardtop? I know in the more modern cars, the convertible seems to always have a lot more flex. But being a full frame car, I was just kind of curious. I mean, I've never been in a convertible one, so not a vert guy by any means. Actually, I went out of my way to look for a hardtop Camaro and not a TPI car. Same with the Firebird. I cannot stand roofless cars. It just weirds me out. Yeah, correct. So yours was that maroon one, right? That thing is freaking gorgeous. I love that car. It's actually, I was really wanting something along those lines, if that's what your car was. Yeah, your car's awesome. I love that thing. It's exactly what I had envisioned for a Grand Prix. I don't know what it is about those cars, the G bodies. When I was like early 20s, I could not stand those cars. I don't know what it was. As soon as I hit 25, it was like, I need one. Gotta have it. Ah. So they do add a little bit of rigidity to the convertibles. So I know when I was looking at 67, I think it was 67, it had this like shake weight thing in the back to to help absorb some of the vibration in the convertible. It just blew my mind that that was their solution, was just add a vibration reducer. Not fix the problem, just add a vibration reducer. What engine color are you thinking of going with? Are you thinking of that 67 Pontiac blue, or are you thinking of going with the 78 like Strato blue? Oh, for those of you that haven't been following along very long with us, so we've been plugging along, adding more and more merch, more and more things. Right now, the main shirt design is a Mustang. No, we're not a Mustang shop. No, we're Pontiac guys. But that's what we have to deal with for who deals with what we deal with. Um, our designer just does Mustang stuff right now. I show up on occasion, guys. That said, there is a pretty freaking sweet Stars and Stripes Alice X Hunter shirt on there right now. So check that out if you get a chance. Appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for stopping by, man. It's been nice to actually sit and like talk to you guys. This whole Rona stuff has been a really big downer. Because usually we're out there at car shows, we're sitting talking cars, doing things. And it's been nice to actually sit down and talk and discuss things for once. So more than likely, I'm going to put mine... I'm going to get lynched for this. I remove AC in literally every car I own. Well, except my truck. And I would if I could. I remove AC in everything that I do. The big deal with that is standard AC in these old cars are terrible. A vintage AC unit is like $15. Wait, $1,500, $15. It's been a long night, guys. $1,500 for a vintage AC unit. That hides under your dash. So what I'll do is I'll remove my AC stuff, make a plate, put the oil relocation kit there. I want it routed away from my headers so that the oil doesn't warm up at all. I usually will mount a breather can nearby that as well from a valve cover. The Butler Valley pans have an excellent way of doing this too. If you get the straight up Valley pan, you can throw a hole in the middle of it, weld a PCV outlet onto it under the intake on the back side, and just route that directly to a breather can on the firewall if you felt like doing that. That way it keeps everything out of all in one spot on the passenger side. Then you have your master cylinder and everything else on the driver's side. It's just kind of how I refer to mine. Yeah, good to hear, man. Because I actually been really impressed with those hoodies. I had to basically fight my girlfriend to get mine back from her. She stole my Firebird hoodie as collateral. So it must be a pretty dang good hoodie if she's taking collateral for that. I mean, on things like the Firebird, there's a lot of really weird odds and ends that you can do to make life a little easier. The inner fenders, the way those come out. On the passenger side, there is a spot where the hose for the heater core goes to the front. I think you could repurpose those mounts and actually like end up ahead with an oil relocation kit there, so that's on the side by the tire rather than the firewall if you want to keep your AC. But again, I remove AC, so that's just kind of what I do. I have heard almost nothing about that. Let me do a real quick peek of what you're talking about. Yeah, I have not. I use a cell in the Camaro, and I think I'm going to go MSD in the Firebird Le Mans, more than likely. Probably like a 6AL. I know a lot of guys are using the Pertronic stuff. I know they've had great success with them. It's just not a brand that I've ever used. The reviews are always phenomenal on them, so they must be doing okay. My problem, as whiny as it is the color of the boxes. It's coming from a guy that usually paints everything. So do with that information what you will. I'm not going to say anything about the wife having a Mustang. I mean, I think it kind of talks for itself that she's got the Mustang. Just saying. I mean, as bad as it hurts to say, I'm actually a New Edge guy. That's kind of what I actually like about it. But yeah, for $25, dude, grab that. I mean, I think I paid $15 for mine or $25 for mine also. Even if you don't use it. It's cool in the garage to hang around. But, yeah, I've always been a New Edge guy. I've always been a Mustang guy until recently. I've always had third gens, though. So, I don't really care about brand at this point. It's just a matter of what's quick. Everything's got an LS anyway, right? So. And if it's a fast Mustang, it probably has a small block in it. Or an LS. Yeah, if you're looking at ignition systems, though, check out Hanson Racing. I think I wonder if I can link it in here because he had a video where he did a Bluetooth ignition setup. So he could set his ignition by his phone, and once that curve was set, he could then set a two-step. So what you do basically is you can set up, it's essentially a trans brake. You can set your car so that it thinks that it's moving, so you are actually launching at 2300 RPM or 3400 RPM or 3800 RPM as your red line, instead of like, it's really hard to explain without actually like doing it. But basically you can set your RPM, your red line, wherever you want, let go of the gas, and as soon as you let go of the gas, or sorry, let go of the brake, the thing will kind of decide in time how to apply the timing. It's just way easier to try and understand once you play with the timing tables and things like that. It's like a sloppy trans brake, if you're familiar with those on 4L80s and 4L60s. Yeah, it's not really a trans brake, it's an electronic trans brake, basically. See, that's a problem. I go down these things where, like, I'll have a thought, and then for the next half an hour, I'll just go down this rabbit hole of whatever I'm doing, and it's a real problem. It's a real problem. Like, a few nights ago, if you have me on Facebook, you'll notice that I posted something about fuel. It's like, there are certain things that I realize that I don't know enough about, like fuel. I just had the question of fueling and why leaded fuel versus E85 versus regular fuel, and how each interacts with fuel and flame fronts and things like that. So I spent the next like 6 hours just enthralled in tech papers. And I ended up leaving more a fan of E85 than I went into it, and I'm already a pretty big E85 fan. And I think these old cars would really benefit from E85 if somebody's willing to give it the time to actually do it. Because it's like $1.35 a gallon is what I looked at today here in the Southwest Michigan area. So you're paying like, even call it $2. Call it $2 a gallon for 110 octane, and it keeps your engine cooler. Typically, E85 is going to run, was it 10 degrees cooler, 20 degrees cooler, because of the alcohol and the amount of fuel. I think it's a huge benefit to these old engines, and I want to see more guys doing it. So if you guys have any experience with E85, let me know. I'm curious about it. I know a lot of the guys in the car club that I'm in Kalamazoo, run E85 and boost and have great success with it. Those dudes make a ton of power. A bunch of guys making 1200 plus in Kalamazoo. I mean, even the 8-second guys are running like 900 horsepower, I think, 85 cars with, I mean, no weight or anything like that, but it's a fast group. That's why, man, I changed my tune from I want to be a 10-second car to I want things to run. You're just not going to compete with these guys. I think as long as I can get these cars into the 12s or 11-second range, I'll be extremely happy. End goal for 2021 is to have the Firebird reaching 11s with the 350. Whether that 350 or another 350. A 350. The Camaro hopefully will be low 12s by the end of 2021. That thing is going to be a bear. For those of you that don't know, I typically drive a 91 Z28. That's kind of my baby. Yeah, dude, Michigan and like Michiana in general is a really big Pontiac spot. I've been really surprised with the amount of guys that do Pontiac stuff in Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, it's been shocking. I mean, you would think the Rust Belt wouldn't be the place to have nice cars, but turns out people love spending money on rusty cars. I mean, I have no room to talk. So... Oh, like I was saying, so my 91 Z28. So the whole point of that car was, and is, a track car. If you've seen the video of me driving the car, I kind of talk a little bit about the car. But it essentially follows the same philosophy as Pontiac engines, which is why I fell into Pontiac like I did. The idea basically is torque over horsepower. The idea that we can outdo our horsepower thanks to our torque. You'll see on that car, I'm shooting for 400 horsepower. I'm shooting for 480 to 500 foot-pounds of torque with a factory TPI setup. I think this is possible with the right cam and the right engine, and I think we can do it fairly cheaply with stock heads. That's the big key, is I think we can do it with stock heads. I mean, ported stock heads, but stock heads. Yeah, Bell's is like 20 minutes away. I mean, where I used to work, Bell's was a normal thing that we did. Personally, I lean more towards like porters and things like that. So going out and like drinking super dark beer is rough. Especially if everybody around you drinks IPAs and you're getting picked on for drinking beer so thick you can cut with a knife. Yeah, Rust sucks. I'm over Rust. I'm over it. Over it. It's a big reason why I want to work on the Camaro is it has no rust. Not a spot. Not a one. The floor's perfect. Engine's perfect. Well, engine bay's perfect. It's perfect. I love that car. And that was a car that actually I got a great deal on. So a real big tip, like how we got our boat too, is if you see posts on Craigslist that describe a vehicle you want, but they don't post pictures, go look at that car. So I picked up my 91 Z28 for $3,000 with a Moser rear end, aluminum drive shaft, rebuilt engine, rebuilt transmission, UMI torque arm, UMI panhard arms, UMI control arms, UMI springs, and Viking shocks for $3,000 because this guy posted the car without pictures. The car was listed for 3 weeks. 2 guys called on it. I was the second one. So, dude, what is your time worth? And do you have the spare time to just go look at a car? Because worst come to worst, you don't buy it, right? You go look at a car, you make a friend, you talk to somebody for a little bit, and you don't buy the car. Best case scenario, you go look at a car that's worth $9,000 and you pick it up for $3,000. I mean, that's like the boat. I mean, our boat, we paid $3,500 for, something like that. It's a $6,000 boat all day long. Guy didn't post pictures on Craigslist. Nobody called him about it. We were the first guys to call about it. Yeah, so don't be afraid. Yeah, a lot of our cars are coming from Wisconsin. The guy that buys the GTOs in Le Mans will usually drive to Wisconsin to go pick up cars because he gets a good price. That said, I've got floors to do to finish up in the 65, the 64, another 65, 67 convertible, another 64, and then a 66 Le Mans, I think, to do floors in for this guy. So we're going to see some A-bodies rolling through the shop. Unless you guys want to buy some cars. if you guys buy some cars, I don't have to work on them, and we can make this guy happy. You know, I don't know if I just haven't shown the cup. I am shocked. Nobody has mentioned the cup. I got about attacked on TikTok because of this cup. The amount of people that jumped down my throat about it. Maybe I'm just causing trouble where it doesn't need to be. Kilt lifter. Why does that sound familiar? Oh, Four Peaks. Yeah. I have heard of Four Peaks. So I'm a pretty big craft beer guy. And whiskey. Whiskey is my jam. So usually when I'm not working on things, I'm either sipping a bourbon or staring out into space with some terrible craft beer. Because evidently I have terrible taste. Just ask anybody I hang out with anyway. So at this point, it's pretty safe to assume that you guys build your own engines, right? Like, you guys aren't, like, outsourcing work and things like that. I see a lot of guys on the Pontiac groups constantly asking for engine builders. I don't know if it's just, like, people are intimidated by the Pontiac because of the price of the engines. Because if you look on, like, eBay, a 400 horse 400 will run you like $6,500. And that just blows my mind, because for $6,500, I could go buy a 550 horse 383. I could find a super nice 440. You know, I could make a lot of moves and make a lot of horsepower for that same price. But it's funny, because actually I have found that working inside the Pontiac space, if you're willing to actually, like, put the work in yourself, is not just cheaper and more efficient, but you gain so much more knowledge about your vehicle. And I think people are forgetting about that. Jake, I'm not sure you have much of a choice, though, being a G-body. I'm sorry. 67. Lord. I finished it. Craig's G-body. Of course, he has to build his own stuff. And so the whole thing with, like, the Firebird was I intended that car to be my welding learning project. I can't weld. I think maybe the next time we do one of these live streams, it might end up being, like, a weird time during the day. So I'm going to hop on sometime midweek next week, and I want somebody to teach me how to weld. I know I'm not great at it, and I know it's going to take some time, but I think that between us as a group, I can figure out welding in one way or another. Jake, is there a reason why you went Tempest over Le Mans or GTO? I mean, you said you have two of them. I mean, personally, I'm a Le Mans fan over the GTO. I'd rather have a 67 Le Mans or 66 Le Mans over a 66 or 67 GTO. I know I'm probably in the minority, but I really like the gills on the front and the back of the 66 and 67. I think, to me, it just really sets the car apart. It's not like the 88 GTAs and the 88 Trans Ams. The 85 to 91, 90? 81, 85 to 90 Firebirds and Trans Ams had a really cool fender brake vent. Dude, and it set the car apart so much from anything else. And then the GTA, they're just like, hey, you know what? Flat. Terrible. Yeah, so I was looking at throwing. So when I originally bought the Firebird, I was told I had a 454 big block, obviously, in the car. When I got there, I thought it was a 400 because I just couldn't look at the cars in a small space. It's like, okay, fine, it's a Pontiac engine, cool, whatever. I really, 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 really wish I had a Chevy engine in that car, to be honest with you. Strictly because I thought that it would be cheaper to build. I will fully admit I have access to a bunch of parts because of who I know and who I'm working with. So to me, Pontiac is cheaper than a Chevy at this point. To me, it costs less to rebuild a Pontiac than it does to rebuild a Chevy. Yeah, and that's the big thing too, is like the GTO, it's a nice looking car. It's a great car. I just like the not caring as much about a Tempest or Le Mans. You know, I get to drive the car. I get to actually enjoy the car instead of being worried about a $65,000 car driving around with nice paint. It's the reason the Firebird has crappy paint. It's the reason the Camaro has satin white. The Camaro is my baby. That car gets the treatment. You know, but the Firebird, I can lean against that car. I can throw tools near it. I can just not care. You know, and the cheaper cars, it's just easier to do that. And I like that, personally. Oof. Man, I'm sure people get butthurt about that constantly. Yeah, and Pontiac, guys, I mean, it's not... There are very few of us that are new to the Pontiac realm. You know, you've got guys like Fulper and Butler and like the Blue Monkey and a few other guys. There's one in Muskegon as well. The guys that do Pontiacs have been around a long time. I mean, I'm new, obviously. I'm young. I mean, I wasn't around when these dudes were innovating things. That said, you hear about these guys that are constantly talking about, hey, you know, I invented this, or I did this or that. Yeah, cool, dude. That's awesome. You know, I appreciate that you took the time in the 70s and 80s to do what you did. That said, I know what you did. We have the books. The learning curve now is so short that younger guys can really get into this thing and succeed at such a rate that they couldn't before. Think about the pre-internet days. I mean, I remember waiting until magazines came out to learn a subject. How crazy is it that I can be struggling with, I don't know, timing. You know, I could be putting timing set on the Firebird and be like, man, I don't know if the timing set is 12 degrees on the crankshaft or if it's, 12 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Well, I can look it up really quick. Right? I can simply grab my phone out of my pocket, search the vastness that is the internet, and know immediately. You know, and to my original point of starting all of this with the goals is being able to like look things up. Dude, it's so much easier, so much nicer. Having these the ability to actually like look up things and figure things out. There's no going back. I don't know how people live the magazine life still. So, Jake, I've been looking at, speaking of hurting people's feelings with GTO and Tempest Clone, I was talking to somebody about a Pontiac 440 build. Basically, it's a 455 with a 428 crank. The thought here is a 66 to 67 Le Mans, or Tempest, with plum crazy purple paint, the flat black side stripe with 440 badging like the Mopars would have. So, I mean, I really think that this would be a successful setup. And if you're like me, I mean, you play... I'm sure you're not, because I mean, I'm a child. Let's be honest. I play certain games where I will spend just hours customizing certain things and just dinking off and figuring out different ways to paint things. A lot of my personality comes out in my cars. I'm a very reserved person in my day-to-day life. I don't tend to talk a lot about, like, my personality. I'm not very loud. I'm not very brash. I let my cars do my talking for me. You know, I think that's a lot of reason why guys gravitate towards automotive is, you know, we're a very quiet group of people traditionally. We're not a group that will brag about ourselves necessarily. But given our cars, we will talk for hours. I mean, we're an hour and 42 in. We will talk for hours about our cars. But if you ask me about myself personally, I'll get embarrassed. You know, I'll get awkward. But you know, our cars allow us a reason to talk about ourselves, and it's really cool to see you guys, you know, interacting in that way too. Yeah, I'm a Dodge guy at heart. So you'll notice a lot of Dodge-inspired things. I've daily driven Mopars most of my life. Actually. So like I was talking about with that stripe in that game. Yeah, it's true. It's a problem. But actually, like... So this is essentially what my thought process is. I think it would be a really unique look, and I think that it would really garner attention and really show off the body lines of what the car is capable of. I mean, it's just one of those things that, like, it's weird. It's just an oddball thing. The cost to do it is stupid versus building an actual good car. For that same price, I could build an actual good 455. So, unpopular opinion. The 65 Barracuda is one of my favorite Mopars. I think the 70 Cuda is wrong, and people hate me for it. Personally, I would love to see a 65 Cuda with a 426 Hemi just because. Yeah, dude. I mean, it seems like everybody is self-taught nowadays is using YouTube as like this platform to like propel everything. Being able to see things physically in a way that you couldn't see before in magazines is so nice. That's why a lot of my videos now, I'm making more of an effort to point things out. I'm sure you noticed in my longer format videos now that we're no longer doing 3-minute videos. We're doing 10-minute long videos. So I want to actually point things out and show that, like, the rear end of the Le Mans. What a pain in the butt. That thing's terrible. Would not recommend that project to anybody. But with longer format, I'm able to show you guys very specific things with how I'm doing things. And it's been a pain in the butt to edit, but I think that at the end of the day, being able to know what you're heading into is a big deal. And if you're working on like regular cars, 1A Auto, I think is what they are on YouTube. They have by far the best videos for that. You know, I've never played with a 273. I've never really actually seen one in person, to be honest with you. I think I've maybe seen one or two at a car show. I see a lot of 318s in the area. A lot of 318s. There is a guy down the road that has a 426. That's a Superbird Daytona. He's got an old one and a 2010 Challenger that's been converted. Just interesting. And weird seeing somebody have that kind of stuff in the area. Yeah, that's been a big thing too, is like, I really want to have a community of people rather than just individuals working by themselves. I mean, that's a big reason why I follow you, is the way Heavy Pedal puts together videos. It's extremely easy to follow and easy to reproduce what he's doing, because he actually fully explains things. Really, it's a big reason why I changed a lot of my format. Was I watched a lot of his videos, I watched a lot of Monty's videos, I watched a lot of Uncle Tony, and I didn't realize how much I actually enjoy the personality coming through, as well as the way they hit the points of what they're working on. I noticed a lot of our earlier videos are really short, to the point, boom, 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 this is how things are done, and we skipped over a lot of good details. The next engine build we do is going to be a lot of very small videos, but a lot of very specific videos. And that's a lot of to do with algorithm. A lot of that is to do with just simply, I mean, we got to make money. But I'm going to organize it in a way that you guys can be like, okay, so I'm working on a timing set install today. What do I need to achieve this today? So that way you guys can order what you need to order and get it done in a timely manner. But again, setting goals, having those finite pieces of information that you need to make goals actually achievable, and that's kind of what I'm after. But guys, it is 10:30, so I think, oh yeah, Old Car Alley is fantastic. But I think I'm gonna hop out of here. I'm out of whiskey, and it is time to get to bed. Gotta put kids in the bus in the morning. But I appreciate you guys following along. I appreciate you guys hanging out tonight. It means a lot to me. A lot more viewers than I thought we were gonna get for the first time. I think we're gonna do this again next week. Might as well do it every week. Thursday, 9 o'clock. Hope to see you guys there. Have a good one, and I will see you guys on the road.